I'll join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here?
Friends.
Friends?
Yeah.
Good friends, I hope.
For sure.
Nice. Well, welcome.
Sister.
Sister? A good sister? Of course. What else? Who's here for the first time? What brings you here?
Friend back there.
Friend that you don't want to sit by your friend?
I do, but during the meditation.
I understand. Well, welcome. For those of you who are here for the first time, glad you're here. Always nice to see new faces and old faces, and that's no reference to age for those of you who got offended by that. But as I often say, this practice, whether you're brand new or been at this a long time, it just repeats. It's just the same thing. Sometimes we think like, okay, I've got this, I figured it out, and then life just crashes and you realize you have to come back to the practice. That's really what this is. For me, I've often said for years, I do the same thing day in and day out because they're just reminders. Reminders to practice loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. Reminders to practice the Paramitas of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. And that's really it. You know, we have opportunities every day, even just if we take patience, to practice patience. And if you look at your life and the life of those around you, if you apply patience to your life, and if you apply patience to those around you, that tends to change the situation. Very often for the better. I don't know, I guess I'm sure there's times where patience would make your life worse, but in theory, we like to think of patience as being a good thing. And very often we lack that the most towards ourselves and then bringing that to others. So, like I said, for me, it's just reminders, all of these things every day. We have opportunities to practice. And it's not about getting good at it or better at it or being the best at it or winning at it. It's just a day-to-day, moment-to-moment opportunity to practice. And that's all. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. Feel free as you are to say hello. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. For those who are maybe sitting for the first time or joining with me for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. All right, you're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit and breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are in a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, same thing, just relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or lap. Just trying to sit up straight. Most important, if you're new, you're not trying to empty your thoughts, you're not trying to go blank, you're not trying to think nothing. Your mind will continue to race. I will say things periodically to remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. Or to wake you up because you've fallen asleep. Not the end of the world, but do your best to stay awake. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada. It means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. The day is young, you have all day. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, this practice doesn't fix that. It helps you become aware of your life that's a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess so you can then make changes in your life. This practice is direct perception into the present moment and awareness of what you think, what you say, and what you do. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of all your thoughts, all your words, and all your actions. And that just repeats every moment. So with that, I'll pause. I always really prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions. And again, for those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on in the chat box there, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions.
Tell the story of that famished monk again, please.
Did you just hear it last week?
No, it was a few weeks ago. I've been trying to remember it, but
What do you remember from it?
the 1 grain of rice a day. I remember he was on a trip and someone offered him food, but the rest is.
That's pretty good for hearing it once, right? So this guy right behind me, a lot of people will say, it looks hungry, he needs a sandwich. For kids, he's often a little scary looking, right? And for those who don't know who this is, it's again the statue right behind me. This is Siddhartha. This is the guy that became the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. And the story is that he raised as a prince, father was a king. I'll sum it up in about 3 minutes. And 29 years old, he left home. I'll even add some things just so you can remember a few more, right? 29 years old, he left home because he'd gone out in the middle of the night. Actually happened over 4 trips, but he went out and he saw old age, sickness, and death. And he saw an ascetic, kind of like a simple nun or monk. And when he was born, it was said that he would either become a great king, right, and rule just like his father, or he'd become a kind of a simple, wise person. So his father didn't want him to be the simple, wise person. His father wanted him to be the king. So they sheltered him. They never saw him see anything age or get sick or die. They knew that if he saw these things, his compassionate heart would take over and he would turn into a nice guy, right? There's a story when he was about 10, 11 years old where he was with some friends and they were shooting like slingshot style rocks at birds. Just little kids messing around. And the story is that, they hit one of the birds and the bird fell to the ground. And at that moment, Siddhartha was just overwhelmed with compassion. That the other kids were, yay, we killed the bird. And Siddhartha at that moment couldn't just be with the pain that he had just caused. So they saw very early on that this compassion was there. And the father didn't want it. So as flowers started to wilt and get old and die, they got rid of them and replaced them with brand new flowers. This is in the palace, where they lived. As people aged, they got rid of them. They only wanted him to see everything that was young and beautiful and alive. They didn't want him to see anyone got sick. They moved them out. They didn't want him to see old age, sickness, or death. So when he sneaks out in the middle of the night, again over 4 times, he sees these things. And he comes back to his buddy Chana, and he was like, what is this? And he says, does this happen to all of us? And Chana said, yes, my lord. He was a prince, so they addressed him as my lord. He said, yes, my lord, we all age, we all get sick, and we all die. And he said something to the effect of, well, I want to figure out how to escape that. How to escape old age, sickness, and death. Now, I know all of you came here on a Saturday morning to learn about Intro to Buddhism to figure out how to escape old age, sickness, and death. That's pretty much why you showed up, right? You're like, I really want to figure out how to escape old age, sickness, and death, right? And but that's at that time of the Buddha, they all believed in rebirth, reincarnation. That was just the way of life, right? 500 years before Christ, if you told somebody you had one life, you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. Fast forward to today, and we grew up in a time where, for most of us, we grew up believing in heaven or hell and whatever else. But it's pretty standard. So at that time, no, it was rebirth, reincarnation, and continuation of consciousness. And he said, well, I know we're going to be reborn, and I don't want to age. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to die. I want to free myself from that. I want to be liberated from that. And he realized the only way to be liberated from that was to stop the cycle of rebirth. Another reason you all showed up here, I'm sure, is to figure out how to no longer be reborn, because I know that's high on your priority list, right? But that's what he was concerned with. He wasn't concerned with making sure that all of your problems go away, that you deal with your anxiety, that all your sadness and depression magically just goes poof, right? He understood that that was actually part of life. This is a huge... I'm not even talking about that yet. This is way more important. But this is a huge piece to what I consider in Western Buddhism gets completely overlooked. Because people come to meditation and Buddhist practice in this kind of modern age, not because they want to free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. They want their depression to go away. They want their anxiety to go away. They want their sadness to go away. And the Buddha said very clearly, the first thing he taught was life is filled with that. Now, yes, we want to figure out how to recognize it, understand the cause of it, and to remove it from our lives. But the piece that so many Western people who learn about Buddhism miss is that he said you're going to experience that. But Western folks reach a stage in their life and like, I don't want that anymore. I want it to be gone. Not realizing that they're the ones that create it. Your cravings, your attachments, your desires, your greed, your anger, your ignorance, you created all of the pain and suffering in your life. Yes, you've gone through trauma, you've gone through heavy experiences, you've gone through madness to get to this stage. But your reaction to all of those things is what causes your suffering. So the Buddha said, I don't want just all that stuff to go away. Siddhartha said, I want to free ourselves from the cycle of birth and death. So after seeing these things, he sneaks out in the middle of the night, coming back to the story at 29, and he left. He cut off his long, beautiful princely hair, which was common, for a prince at that time. And he took his princely, clothes and robes or clothes and got rid of them and exchanged them for robes. He found lots of little cloth, and he cut it up into small little pieces and patched it together and created a robe. And he lived with 7 items. And that was it. A robe and a bowl and a razor to shave his head and a stone to sharpen it and a kind of a like a sifter to get water without killing any bugs. So you had 7 items: string to sew the robes. You had 2 robes, bowl for begging for food. But that was it. 7 items he lived with. I got like 7 items in my pocket, So for 6 years he roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains, trying to figure out how to overcome the cycle of rebirth. And he met up with 5 guys, and they became kind of traveling buddies. And as you pointed out correctly, it said that they lived on 1 grain of rice a day, because at that time in India, they thought that if they overcame attachment to physical form, that was the way to awakening. That was the way to end suffering, was overcome this attachment to the physical body, right? So 1 grain of rice a day is what they ate. They did lots of other, they would hang from a tree weeks at a time, stand on a leg weeks at a time, trying to overcome their attachment to this physical form. Came to a riverbed, and somebody offered him food. And he realized he was pretty hungry. So it was a bowl of like kanji, porridge, rice, and all his buddies were like, no, we're not eating. We can't eat. And he said something to the effect of, well, dude, I'm hungry. Actually, probably exactly what he said, he said, well, I'm going to put the bowl in the river. And if the bowl goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. And so the teaching is that the bowl went against the stream, and he realized he needed to eat. So he started to eat. He regained his physical strength, because they were near death. He regained his physical strength. Those 5 guys, they left him. They called him a traitor, a sellout, a food eater. They were like, you don't understand anything, we're gone. So he went off on his way, continues his journey. And at 35, he sits down under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, India, and says, I'm not leaving from this sea until I figure out why we suffer. And he began to understand that the nature of all suffering comes from one place and one place only. And that's where? Your mind. That's it. Right? So he sat for 21 days, as they say, didn't move. He, as it's taught, neutralized his karma, meaning body, speech, and mind, stilled all of it. And then after 21 days, he began to understand that the nature of his mind was his suffering. At that moment, he realized that nobody was going to understand his teachings. He thought he'd come across something so profound that nobody could understand this. And the story is that Brahma, the Hindu god, came down and said, there are people with little dust in their eyes. Go teach. They will understand. And so, if you look above that exit sign back there, there's a tapestry, and that's Siddhartha at that moment, and those 5 guys who came up to him, that's what they call the first turning of the Dharma wheel, where he taught the 4 Noble Truths at Deer Park. And those 5 guys sitting there, those were his first 5 disciples. Those were the 5 guys he was traveling with that left him. And they sat down and they said, there's Siddhartha. Looks like he's figured something out. Let's go sit with him. They sat down. He taught the 4 Noble Truths, the first teaching of Buddhism. Life is filled with dukkha, which is suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. This means all of our lives we're going to struggle. Some heavy and traumatic, and some just because you didn't like the latte that you ordered. Your food wasn't cooked perfectly, so you send it back. So all of our life is filled with this dukkha, moments of suffering, from extreme to little stuff that really doesn't mean anything, but it causes us so much heartache. The second thing he taught is the cause of suffering, second noble truth, and that's greed, anger, and ignorance. We always want more, we're angry at the way things are, and we ignore reality, meaning we're stuck in our own head. And we think that our perception of reality is actually correct, which is funny because if there are 50 of us in this room, we all have a different perception of things. So who's right? I could throw something up there and I'm sure all of us would agree. I could throw something else out and we all would disagree. And I could throw up other things and we would be stuck somewhere in the middle. And then we'd spend the rest of our lives fighting each other over what we think is correct. This is the ignorance. That we're ignoring reality and we're stuck in our perception of reality. Right? So that's the second noble truth, greed, anger, ignorance. And the third noble truth is the ending of suffering. liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering, just getting through your day without being pissed off and angry at yourself and the world, in a very simple way to put it. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. And that's having correct views, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. This, in essence, is your karma, your action. What you think, what you say, and what you do. So he taught these four things, these four noble truths to the five guys. And they said, you understand how to free ourselves from the cycle of rebirth. You have awakened. We will call you the Buddha. The word Buddha simply means the awakened one. So they called him Buddha. He then got up, taught for 45 years, and at 80 he died. And then Buddhism spread from there. I think the two things I'll point about the importance of this statue, at least at this moment, is it introduces what we call the middle path, where in our lives we're often incredibly out of balance. And this could be with the amount of food we consume, the amount of stuff we consume, the amount of time of others that we consume. Our emotional state is often out of balance. And so this isn't about telling you where the balance or where the middle is. This middle path will change for each person in here. But to begin to explore, where are you out of balance? Where do you have more than you need? Where do you have not enough? And again, this is physically, mentally, and emotionally. Exploring where your life is out of balance and finding that middle for you. Right? So that middle path was the starvation of 1 grain of rice, not the way. So he then built a life where they would go begging for alms and he would eat 1 meal a day. Put the head down, put a bowl up, and whatever went into it, they would then share and they would eat. So that was enough for them. You know? We eat some of us, 3-4 times a day, working a couple snacks, and we probably throw away 20% of the food that we order, you know? Only to then be hungry 3 hours later and order more. And then eat 80% of that and then throw it away. And then 3 hours later, we're hungry again. You know? One of the coolest experiences I had in monastery life was we would eat our meal, and then you had the bowls. One was rice and one was whatever they put in it. And when you were done with it, you would then you had water or tea, depending upon what it was. You would then take that and you would pour it in the bowl, both of them. And you would, with your chopsticks, stir it and then drink it. So anything that was in the bowl that you took was consumed. You could take as much as you wanted. It was silence. The process was you would push your bowl to the front, and that would let the people serving you, the monks serving the food, that would let them know that you wanted more. And you were welcome to get as much as you wanted, but you had to consume everything you took. And there were so many variations of food, you didn't know like what you would get. So it's like over here, you know, it's equivalent to say you got pizza. And you're like, yeah, I want another slice. So you push the bowl forward and then comes back like, you know, broccoli and carrots. So you didn't know what you were going to get, but the teaching was whatever you get, be grateful for it and eat it. And then at the end of the day, when you were done, ended your meal, the bowls were empty. Now they still got washed, of course, but they were returned fully clean of food. Man, we waste a lot of food. So the second thing is why we picked this statue, which is when we started the temple 18 years ago, this was us, and in many ways it's still us, physically, mentally, emotionally, near death, not sitting with this enlightened Buddha that we have it all figured out and we're trying to be these Buddhas. We're trying to recognize where are we starving ourselves, where are we killing ourselves, where are we physically, mentally, emotionally, as individuals and as a community, where are we living in an unhealthy way. So we sit with the Siddhartha statue as kind of a buddy, a mentor, a friend, a guide, who says, hey, you're not doing it healthy. Not about right or wrong, but you're not doing it healthy. So to explore that. So, yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, when I wake up in the morning, sometimes I have a mini anxiety attack with everything that's going on and conditions and situations. And once I get up, I'm okay. And my life is good, as you say, it could be better. But I was wondering, how can I avoid that, or what can I to do other than get up and get going.
Yeah.
Basically, I need something to take my mind off what I was just thinking, which was all negative.
Yes. Well, the beauty of what you just asked is the second piece to what you just said, which is you have an absolute clear understanding of why that mini panic anxiety attack is happening because of what you were thinking. So your question is how to not allow those mini anxiety attacks to occur. And the answer is very simple. Stop thinking what you were thinking. Just stop it.
That's what I'm asking. How do you stop it? Just say, get behind me, Satan, or what?
I mean, you could try that. I don't know if that's going to work.
It hasn't worked yet.
It hasn't worked, all these years, not there yet. So, without all the details, but is this like literally the moment you wake up, it kind of occurs first thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
And especially after a nightmare.
say again?
After a nightmare.
After a nightmare. So, your mind is immediately going to negative things, as you said. Thus the anxiety, thus the panic, thus the fear, thus the worry. Simple example, without turning around, can you see what's on the wall behind you?
No,
No, why not?
because it's behind me.
It's behind you. Now, if I said, you don't need to do this, but if I said turn around and look at the wall, you could then describe what's there, right? So this is you physically using your vision to look at something. What you're asking about is how to recreate that exact same thing, but with thoughts. Because your thoughts are going towards negative things. So the simple answer is, as soon as you start to read, there's many things you can do, but as soon as you start, do you like comics?
No.
What do you like to read?
Buddhist books.
Okay. I was just trying to, do you like tea? Do you have coffee? I was trying to take it away from being this like Buddhist thing.
Lasagna.
Lasagna, okay. You like lasagna? Yeah.
Love lasagna.
Love lasagna, wonderful. Garfield, Garfield. So you do like comics. Garfield's my hero, you know that, right?
No.
You didn't know that? Oh yeah, he's my hero. Yeah, all he does is eat lasagna, sleep, and he hates Mondays. So I'm like, Garfield is my Buddhist master. I mean that very seriously. But, so lasagna or Garfield. We'll go with Garfield. Or I was going to go with lasagna. Either way, you should have in your fridge at all times lasagna. And as soon as you wake up, this is like the very deep esoteric Buddhist teaching. There's a sutra out there called the Lasagna Sutra. And as soon as you wake up, you should go to and you start thinking your negative thoughts, go to your fridge, open it up, take out the lasagna, and just look at it. Take a bite of it if you want, look at it. Get a Garfield. You ever seen those Garfield, the 365 Garfield calendars? Get one of those. And as soon as your mind starts to go to negative stuff, open up the Garfield comic and read it. It's just shifting. I'm not saying this is easy to do. But in theory, it is no different than, look how quickly, now I do want you, turn around and look at the wall. You see how quickly that happened? Now you see it. And now you know. In theory, the mind, this is what we call training the mind. This is why the meditation practice is important. What we're ultimately getting at is training the mind to be present. Now, it's a lot harder to just use sensation of breath or even guided meditations, because in that moment, you're like, oh shit, I need my guided meditation. I need my meditation. No, you start panicking because you don't even have that. I've just replaced your Buddhist book and meditation with Garfield and lasagna.
Nice.
Right? I don't know who said nice, but I think, yeah. It's so simple. And looking at that lasagna, looking at that Garfield is no different than bringing the mind to the breath. It's present time awareness in Zen practice.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, someone gave me a Garfield doll 20 years ago and I still have it.
Yeah. So it's just shifting the focus, shifting the attention. Definitely. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Just curious, was your stop in reference to the Bob Newhart skit?
It's funny you say that. Yes, and I've been dying to use it, and And I never, I mean, I maybe because of an age thing, but I kind of missed Bob. The question was my reference to a Bob Newhart skit. I missed Bob Newhart. Never saw it, never aware. I mean, I was aware of it, but somebody about 2 weeks ago sent me a little clip of that Stop It skit. And I've been dying to be able to use it because I think it's so Buddhist. So yes, it was referenced to that. I thought that was brilliant.
It worked.
It worked. Thank you. Yeah.
Compassion. What is compassion?
What is compassion? So, for me to start, and just to give it some context behind that for those who are new to Buddhist practice, the second cause of suffering, or the second noble truth, which is the cause of suffering, is greed, anger, ignorance. And the practice of overcoming greed is the practice of generosity. The practice of overcoming anger is the practice of compassion. And the practice of overcoming ignorance is the practice of wisdom. So the practice, or the question is, what is compassion? How do we cultivate? You didn't say this, but what is compassion? And ultimately, how do we cultivate it? So for me, I always like to look at, with, say, generosity, compassion, and wisdom, to start with, instead of looking at what is ultimate compassion. Because we can talk about that in a minute, or we can explore that. But if we're looking at cultivating it, right? I mean, we don't want to know, my guess is you don't want to know what compassion is just to know what it is. We want to know what compassion is to practice it. So if the opposite of compassion is anger, according to Buddhist teachings, and when anger occurs and arises, we want to practice compassion. The first step is to recognize the anger. So I ask you this, do you know when you're angry?
I can feel it rising in my body and mind.
You feel it rising in your body and mind. And do you recognize when you're acting, say, out of anger? Sometimes. Sometimes, right. Not all. Sometimes it just happens so quick and we're just done. You know, we're like, man, that was really stupid. I shouldn't have done that. So sometimes it happens so fast we don't recognize it. That was half of my life growing up, right? And so the first step for me of cultivating compassion is recognizing the anger as it arises, the feeling as it arises, and working on having that occur less. So it's not about chasing this compassion thing. It's about decreasing the anger or the acts of anger or hatred or rage or violence or however our anger is expressed. Very often in words, very often, in a typed message, social media post, very often in a look. And there's so many ways that we can express anger that are not speech. Right? I mean, you ever looked at someone who did something, and you're just like, oh, there's so much anger there, but we were silent, but we're just fuming with anger. So beginning to do those things, those acts of anger, small or large, less, by default, is compassion. If I act less from a place of anger, that's a very compassionate thing to do. Now, does that make sense so far? And I look at all of them the same thing. If I'm wrapped up in greed, I don't need to say, well, what is extreme generosity? I need to figure out where's my greed and do that less. Same thing with anger, same thing with ignorance. If I want to cultivate ultimate wisdom, I'm not seeking for this enlightened state of wisdom. I'm looking to understand where is my ignorance, where am I ignoring reality, and do that less. So that to me is the first step in cultivating this compassion. Then I think looking specifically at what is compassion, the word that immediately when I look at Buddhist teachings that comes to mind with compassion is love. But love without control, love without manipulation, love without attachment, meaning expectation. And have you ever been in a loving relationship and yet you were really controlling? Right? Only one of you. Nice. You should have 2 slices of lasagna in your fridge, for being the one honest person in the room. But this idea, we often think of like we're in love, we have compassion, but we're also trying to manipulate and control and get everything we want. Oh, I love you, as long as you do everything I want you to do. That's not love. That's control. That's power. That's unhealthy. That's toxic, right? So love with non-attachment, love without expectation, love with appreciating each and every moment, to me, that is what compassion is about. I also think that compassion is something that must start within ourselves. It's very often easier to cultivate, I shouldn't say easy, easier to cultivate love and compassion and kindness towards others. And it's very often super difficult to cultivate love and compassion and kindness towards ourselves, because the expectations we have set for ourselves are just like through the roof, just extreme. For some reason, after all the trauma and experiences we've been through in our lives, we read a couple Buddhist books and we're like, man, I should always be kind and compassionate to myself. And yet we speak so harshly to ourselves so often. So you can bring in right speech. Right speech, or being honest and kind and gentle, should apply to the way we talk to ourselves about ourselves. So using right speech and talking to ourselves in a kind, beautiful way is an act of compassion. All of really the practice of the precepts, or if we less harming, less killing, less stealing, less intoxicants, right? If we do all of those things less or not at all, those are very compassionate things, So that's my take on compassion in this moment. Yeah. Anything else? We'll do one more before we close. Yeah.
Can you tell me what your approach to meditation and how, I don't know if it's not necessarily like a goal going in, does you really focus on your breath? Are you trying to clear your mind?
Yeah. So the question was, can I talk about my approach to meditation? Is there a goal? Am I trying to clear my mind? So a couple things. Let me start by saying this. The practice that I actually lead, like what I just led this morning, in many ways is different, but also exactly the same as what I practice individually, personally, for myself. And I'll explain that in a minute. I'll also say that I first got into meditation when I was 20. So that was 29 years ago. In 2003, so that was, 21 years ago? It became an everyday practice, everyday part of my life. And I can also say that I have been doing, and the way I do it, let me say this first. I have been doing literally the exact same practice for over 20 years. It's never changed. I've always been a very just like, tell me what to do or not do, and I'll either do it or not do it. I found a meditation practice that I attached onto. It's the Zen practice, and I've stuck with it. If 100 people lead you in meditation, they'll lead you 100 different ways. None of them are right or wrong. None of them are good or bad, unless they tell you to go harm people and charge you a bunch of money. So as I say all of this, clearly it's not my approach to have you think that, and this is for anyone who might not know me or think this, that I think that my way is the way or the right way. Thousands of types of meditation practices. Google meditation, you'll see thousands of them out there. For the most part, they're all good. Now, my personal practice is what we refer to as shamatha, which is calm abiding, often translated as observation on sensation of breath. And as it's taught in the Anapanasati Sutra, one of the Buddhist sutras, the Buddha said very clearly, when you're taking in and taking a short breath, know that you're breathing a short breath. If you're breathing out and taking a long breath, know that you're taking a long breath. Meaning it is simple observation of sensation of breath. In other words, for me, the way I have trained and been trained and the way I practice is My breath is my lasagna. It is Garfield. It is whatever. It is the wall behind you. It is whatever you need to put your mind on, so you're not wrapped up in the anger and sadness and depression of the past, and you're not wrapped up in the stress, anxiety, and fear of the worry of the future. Present time awareness, observation of sensation of breath, that's it. Because if you focus on one thing, breath, shoe, bottle of water, a piece of lasagna, if you focus on one thing, what are you not focused on?
Everything else.
Everything else. And when you focus on everything else, how does that tend to make you feel? Anxious, stressed out, overwhelmed. So that's, for me as a practitioner, that's my practice. Again, you can use a candle as a beautiful practice. A flower, an incense stick is really cool because you can also use it as a timer. You can literally watch, in Buddhism when we offer incense, it's the teaching of impermanence. That incense stick, that's us. We have been lit. We are alive. Every moment, every breath, we are one moment closer to death. So don't waste any moments being angry and sad and anxious and depressed about all the shit that's outside of you that you don't have control over anyways. Yet you have this illusion that you think you can control and fix everything. We can't even control what we do. If for some reason we think we can control the universe, you know? So that's my personal practice. Does that make sense so far? When I lead meditation in what we call Intro to Buddhism and meditation, I'm in some ways expressing that. But the Zen practice, which I often lead in other spaces and times as well, I would hit the bell, I would be silent for however long, and I would hit the bell again. And that's it. And you would be stuck with what? This thing. So when I lead meditation, I tend to guide it a little bit, if nothing more, to remind people, come back to the breath. So I lead it a little bit differently than I practice, but ultimately it's the same. And for me, the Dharma Bum Temple, that's the beauty of this space, is we have different practices led every night by different people from different Buddhist traditions. Some people absolutely hate, like the Heart Sutra class. It's silent. We sit silently for 20 to 30 minutes. When you sit silently, you're stuck with yourself. A lot of people can't sit with themselves. My suggestion always is if you can't sit with yourself for 20 or 30 minutes, start. Start learning to sit with yourself for 2 to 3 minutes. If you can't do 2 to 3 minutes, 20 to 30 seconds. Learn to sit silently. Guided meditations, Vipassana practice, insight meditations, all the Tonglen meditations, all these other Buddhist meditation practices are also incredibly beautiful. If you're someone who has a really hard time being in silence, then practice some of those as well. But again, I always point out to people, if you have a hard time being in silence, don't always escape from your silence with some gentle guided meditation sailing you down the river. Because then you're just going to spend the rest of your life looking for some gentle, silent meditation to sail you down the river. And learning to be with yourself is, I think, the hardest, often the scariest, but also, I think, the most life-changing. So, yeah. So I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Natalia during her time of rebirth and to Corey during her time of suffering. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. A few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist practice and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So as I just alluded to, every night we have different practices going on, different Buddhist traditions. Every Thursday, 4:30, we do, I still think, one of the best things around here. It's a food redistribution program. So we prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you think your life sucks and you lack gratitude for everything that you have, feed people who sleep on a sidewalk every night, and it tends to put things into perspective and helps, I think, cultivate a sense of gratitude for all we have in our lives. Recovery Sangha, anyone battling addiction, we have classes pretty much every day with that. Downstairs meditation hall is like 99% done. The new stain went on the floor, so it smells pretty strong. We also need to do a little trim on that as well. But so that should be hopefully next week. If not, definitely the following. We'll go back to using the downstairs meditation hall, which in essence we doubled because it was too small. Buddha for You is down there if you need anything. Otherwise, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Be well and enjoy your day. See you soon.